Hi, I'm Scott Williams, and this is Heather Davis, Missouri State High School basketball official who joined me today. We're here to talk to coaches and athletes about some of the most commonly called basketball violations in regulation basketball that you will see, you can learn from. She's going to talk about why it's called and maybe ways you can avoid it, or as a coach, the way you can teach it so they can avoid it and you can call on them in the game. We're going to talk about five or six different types of violations. I'm going to start off with ball handling regulations. Let's start off with ball handling with dribbling. So we'll start off with that. I'll turn it over to Heather. We're going to do dribbling, and then double dribble, travel, and carrying the ball.
All right, the first one we'll discuss is double dribble. This is a really common violation at all levels, especially younger levels. There's a couple different reasons that a double dribble is called. The first reason would be because you actually put two hands on the ball. So if you're dribbling and you happen to put two hands on it, that would be called a double dribble. So what's important is to keep that offhand off of the ball at all times, or even away from the ball. So at times people have the tendency, whatever they're dribbling, as a defender gets close, to put that other hand over there to guard the ball. And instead what you need to do is use your body to guard the ball. So when you're dribbling, somebody gets close, instead of getting that hand there, go ahead and just turn your body and get the defender off of you with your body, or even put your off hand out to protect the ball. But if you get that other one on there, it will be called a double dribble. Probably the more common double dribble is actually picking the ball up and dribbling again. So if you dribble it and you pick it up, at that time you're going to have to pass or shoot the ball. If you put it back on the floor again, that would be called a double dribble. So it's important that before you pick the ball up, that you know what you're going to do with it. So do not pick the ball up until you're ready to pass to a teammate or you're ready to put up a shot at that time. Our next violation would be traveling. Traveling is a little more complicated. So some people call this walking as well. What's important with traveling is establishing a pivot foot. So whenever you pick the ball up, you're going to have one foot that should stay on the floor at all times. And that's called your pivot foot. I'll demonstrate here for you. So if I'm dribbling and I pick the ball up, I use my left foot as my pivot foot. I can move my right foot around at all times. But if I pick my left foot up and I put it back down and switch pivot feet, that is called a travel. So this happens a lot for different reasons. One of the most common travels you'll see is somebody just taking off too fast with the ball. As we say, their feet get ahead of their dribble. So they catch the ball and they start basically running with the ball before they put it on the ground. So what's important then is whenever you get the ball, before you just start taking off toward the basket, think about putting the ball on the floor. So that first step, when you take the step, the ball should go to the ground at the same time to prevent that traveling call. Another common traveling call is when you're close to guarded by a defender. So if I pick the ball up and I've established that pivot foot, and somebody gets up close to me, what we do a lot of times is we kind of start backing up and we move that pivot foot. So instead, what you need to do is use your body to get that defender off of you. And you just move on that same pivot foot over and over to keep that person off of you. Another traveling call you might see is if you jump in the air with the ball and you come back to the court. So if I'm going up to shoot, and when I go to shoot, somebody gets in front of me and is about to block my shot, I cannot come back to the floor with the ball. So at that time, I got to release the ball, either with a shot or a pass. But I have to do something besides come back to the floor with the ball. So like I said, traveling is called for a number of reasons, but those are some of the most common traveling calls. So like I said, the main thing to focus on to not travel is just to protect the ball with your body instead of moving your feet, to not get ahead of yourself when you catch the ball. Go ahead and think about putting the ball on the floor before you take off. And then also just establishing that pivot foot and sticking with it at all times. Our next one would be what we call carrying or palming the ball. This is becoming a lot more common because if you watch the NBA, you see people do this all the time. And it doesn't get called a lot of times, but it does usually at the lower basketball level. So what we're talking about when we're talking about carrying or palming would be something such as this. Where I'm dribbling and I get my hand underneath the ball and I start turning it over. Like this. So what I'm essentially doing is double dribble. Because I'm getting my hand underneath the ball, it's coming to a rest, and I'm putting it back to the floor. So it's important at all times that you keep your hand on top of the ball. Sometimes you'll hear a referee actually tell you that. They're trying to help you out. They'll say, keep your hand on top of the ball. And they're just telling you basically don't get your hand underneath the ball because we're going to call a palming or carrying violation on you. Another one you see, you'll see this kind of at the higher levels a lot of times, so we try to mimic it, is that crossover where they get way out here and cross the ball over to the other side. If it comes to a rest in your hand, that would be a carrying or palming violation. So make sure when you're doing that crossover dribble, practice keeping it close to your body. Keep it in here so you keep your hand on top of the ball at all times.
Well, that's a very good job. That's a very good explanation of all those ball handling violations. The next two we're going to talk about are lane violations. Heather's going to talk about 3 seconds in the lane, and then she's going to give you a little bit of tips on a free throw, where you can enter, where you can as a shooter and as a side lane participant.
All right, so we're talking about 3 seconds in the lane. This is something that happens a lot. So what we need to know first of all is what is the lane? A lot of times we tell athletes to get out of the lane, but they don't really understand what we're talking about. So I'm going to walk this lane for you. Basically, the lane starts at the big spot. You go all the way up to the free throw line, and you go across and back down. There's a big rectangle. Some gyms you're in, this will actually be painted a different color, but it's basically what we call the free throw lane. In this lane area, you can only be in here 3 seconds, and actually less than 3 seconds. You'll hear a lot of referees tell you, get out of the lane, get out of the lane. They're trying to help you out, get you out of there so we don't have to call that violation. But what we're asking you to do is to get both feet out of the lane. If you take 1 foot out of the lane, if you step out here and you get 1 foot out, you're still considered in the lane. So you have to clear the lane with both feet, just like this, before you can get back in. A lot of times the reason we see this is because it may be post players who play close to the basket, who are standing there waiting on a rebound. You'll see that a lot where they just want to get that offensive rebound and put it back up. So they're just standing there waiting and waiting. Or you have a big guy who wants to stand inside and get the ball. Obviously, it's easier to score closer to the basket. So a lot of people want to stand right around the basket area. But we can't do that because it's not fair to the opponent. So we do ask you to only be there in 3 seconds, get out, and then you can get back in at that time. One thing that you do need to know is 3 seconds does stop on a shot attempt. So basically, as soon as one of the people shoot, the 3 seconds stops at that time, and you can continue to be in the lane and rebound and put the ball back up. But once you get control of it again, the 3 seconds starts back over. So don't worry about it as long as everybody's putting the ball up there and continuing to shoot an offensive rebound. You can stay in there and rebound with them. As far as the free throws, the main thing you need to know is on the free throw lane, the first lane spot is going to be right here above the block. And then you have 2 more. You have 1 right here and 1 right here on each side. So you can put 3 players on each side of the lane. The referees will help you with that. They'll get you guys in the right spots. What's important is when you get in that lane space, that you stay in between the lines. So you have the lane line in the front, and you have a line on each side. Basically, that line goes from the floor to the ceiling. What I mean by that is you can't be reaching across the line trying to battle the person next to you. And that happens a lot of times. You'll hear the referee tell you to put your arms down and stuff. So just stay within that same box at all times. If you're on the sideline line, like I just showed you, as soon as the shooter releases the free throw, as soon as it loses their hand, you can step into the lane to rebound. The only person that can't do that is going to be the free throw shooter. They actually have to wait till the ball hits the basket before they can jump in, so that they don't get an advantage jumping in there and getting that rebound. You'll have some players that are behind the three-point line on free throws as well. They basically go with the same rules as the shooter, meaning they cannot cross the free throw line extended on a free throw until the ball hits the basketball. So that's the main things on free throws. Time to get that free throw shooter, get in there early because they see they're going to miss that shot short and want to get their rebound, but they do have to wait till the ball hits the rim.
Great job. The next area we're going to talk about while we have the lane set up and the camera set up this way are commonly called fouls. Heather's going to talk about some player control fouls, about the common over the back call, which is not called that. She'll explain what that's called now. She'll talk about reaches, and she'll talk about charges and blocks a little bit. All these are important because a lot of time in games, this is where it can get a little dangerous. You don't play under control. And this one thing that will disqualify you from the game if you get 5 fouls, you can foul out. So whether you do whatever order you want, but sometimes about foul.
Okay, so when we're discussing fouls, it's important to know that you are allowed to foul. You're allowed to foul in a game. You get 5 fouls. If you get that 5th foul on any player, they are disqualified. The fouls are part of the game. Sometimes they're needed. Sometimes you prevent an easy shot, you're going to foul somebody, and that's okay as long as you do it the right way. One thing to remember when you foul at all times is that you need to be making a play on the ball. So what we do want to try to avoid with all fouls is those pushes in the back or excessive hard fouls, because those can result in intentional fouls, which result in free throws and possession of the ball. So you definitely want to eliminate those altogether and make sure you're always making a play on the ball. So we'll start out with the ball handler. When they have the ball, what you're allowed to do. As a defender, the main thing to remember is play with your feet. As long as you move your feet and stay in front of the offensive player, you don't really need to use your hands. When you start using your hands is when you'll get called for a foul. So if you're defending the ball handler and you put a hand or what we call an arm bar on the offensive player, that is going to be a foul. So what's important is that you actually get down in a position to get your hands off and continue to move your feet to stay in front of them. If you reach and you get your hand on them to stop them from going by, that's most likely going to result in a foul. Another foul that we see a lot of is shooting fouls. When people go to shoot, they get fouled a lot. And it's going to happen from just preventing a shot. But the main thing to remember with shooting foul is just to get big and go straight up if at all possible. So if you just get your body in front of them, put your hands straight up in the air, make them shoot over the top of you, that's usually all you need to do to defend the offensive player and make their shot more difficult. But if you reach down at all or you move your body into the offensive player, it's most likely going to result in a shooting foul. When we're talking about rebounding fouls, or as some people still refer to it as over the back, you'll hear people yell about that a lot, and it does happen. So the main thing to remember on rebounding fouls is it's all about position. So if you get your body between the basket and the other team, then you're probably not going to get a foul. You want to try to get as close to the basket as possible and get between you and the other team. If there's another player between you and the basket, it's important that you don't create contact with that player. If you create contact with them, then that's going to be a foul. So if you try to push them out of the way or go through them, that's going to result in a foul. If the ball happens to come off high or long and you're behind somebody, it's okay to go get that ball, as long as you're not initiating contact with any other player on the opposite team. We'll talk offensive fouls. We'll talk about that a little bit, a player control foul. The main thing you need to know about that is it's a player control foul, which means you lost control in most cases. So it's important to remain under control at all times whenever you're on offense. So a lot of what prevents that is just keeping your head up, keeping your eyes up, seeing the floor, seeing who's in front of you. If you put your head down, a lot of times if you look at the floor, you can't see that defender in front of you, and you may run them over at that time. And then that would be considered an offensive foul. To draw an offensive foul as a defender, just as we talked about with defending the ball handler, you need to move your feet and get in front of that player. If you don't move your feet and establish position in front of the offensive player, it will be called a defensive foul or a blocking foul. So that's a bang-bang play. It's difficult to call at times, but it's all about positioning on offense and on defense and just simply being under control.
Hey, thank you, Heather. We're going to go ahead and rotate the camera for a second now, and we're going to rotate it to half court, and Heather will walk with the camera. We're going to talk about backcourt violence. All right, so what I'm going to do actually is just come toward the camera and kind of show you what we mean by backcourt. So this line right here is the half court line, and it's what determines backcourt. So my front court is going to be the direction I'm going here. This is considered the front court, and behind me is considered the back court. So as I'm going forward, there's basically what we call 3 points that have to be across the half court line. And once those 3 points cross, you cannot go back.
So once you get 2 feet and the ball, so right now if I'm dribbling, I get 1, 2, and the ball across that court. I cannot pass it back behind the line, and I also can't step back and dribble behind the line. If I was to dribble up the half court, and I just put 1 foot across, and the other foot stays behind, I can still come back at that time and then go back across. So it's important that you remember 3 points at all times. It's 2 feet and the ball have to cross the half court line. And once that happens, you cannot go back either on the dribble or on the pass.
Okay. So now we're going to move into the last violation that we're going to talk about today, and that will be the inbounding violations. And we will, do you want to do that under the basket or do you want to do it on the sideline?
We'll do it under the basket.
Okay. We'll rotate the camera and go to the sideline, or to the bottom.
So we'll talk about offensive violations, but the offensive and defensive violations when they're down the ball. So if I'm inbounding the ball underneath the basket here, there's a couple things to remember. First of all, this black line right here is getting out of line. So this time I am out of bounds. If I happen to step over this line, I'm now inbounds, and that is a violation. It is important to know that the black line is considered out of bounds. So I can actually step on the line, as long as I don't step across the line, I'm still considered out of bounds. But you really just want to avoid that line altogether to make sure that you do not step across. Whenever throwing in the ball, important thing to remember is I can actually move my feet while I'm out of bounds. And I can move from side to side where I have a 3-foot space to move with it. So where I'm next time I have a foot, I have a foot this way, and then I have a foot this way that I can move in. So if I'm trying to inbound to my teammate, I can move my feet in that area whenever I have a spot throw. Spot throwing would be after a dead ball, the referee says that you have to hold your spot, and that's what they mean. That doesn't mean you have to stand with 2 feet on the ground and be stuck there. You can still move around a little bit in your 3-foot window at that time. On a throw-in, after a made basket, you can actually run a whole baseline at that time. So you'll see that sometimes, and that's very helpful. If you have a team pressing or something, try to get the ball down. As long as you stay behind this flat line after a made basket, you can run back and forth along the baseline and try to get the ball into the team. When it comes to defensive violations on inbounds, I'm going to have Scott actually pull the ball out of bounds so we can show this stuff. If I'm the defender here, one thing I can't do is I cannot cross this black line. So this line, that's the top guard area, the lane line. This goes from the floor to the ceiling. And I have to stay on the inbound side of it. So if I'm defending him like this, I cannot reach across this line, even if I want to touch the ball. So I got to stay on this side. So a lot of times you see the referee, they're going to do this for you to show you where that line is. So you cannot reach across the line. Reach across, it's going to be a violation the first time. And the second time, it can actually be a technical foul. And never do you want to hit the ball once out of bounds because that will result in a technical foul. So it's okay to jump up and down, move your arms, do all that stuff, but you can't reach across the line at any time. Even though that ball is right there, you can't reach out there and grab it.
That covers the most commonly called basketball violations that I asked Heather to go over today. So again, I thank Heather Davis, Missouri State High School basketball official. We're taping this from the Cape Girardeau Sportsplex. So review it again, go through each violation, and it should help you with her explanation to reduce the number of calls your players have. And as a player, you won't get called as often on those violations. Thank you.